Hey guys, today we're going to watch the video from Wizards and Warriors. I actually found these guys from their history channel, Kings and Generals. They talk a lot about history, specifically military history, and their fantasy channel isn't much different. They just talk about it in a fantasy context. This episode is about the Imperial Navy in Warhammer 40k. I actually don't know much about how it works, how the Navy works in 40k. All I know is that it used to be the same thing as the Imperial Army back in during the Post-Heresy, and afterwards they saw how much devastation the Imperial Army and Navy together could do. So they said, "Yeah, no, you guys have to be two separate things." And so now we have the Imperial Navy and the Astra Militarum. So we're just gonna go ahead and give their video a watch and see what they have to say.
It is the 41st millennium, a time of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods. Everywhere around the galaxy, cruelty and injustice reign absolute. Every surviving species has had to adapt to the horrors of its age. One by one, they have seen their hope and optimism die, making way for endless, fruitless war.
Well, maybe if they would stop being Xenos, it wouldn't be so bad.
Humanity is but one of those species. Propped up by the will of the Emperor 10,000 years after his internment upon the Golden Throne, mankind desperately staves off extinction. Yet in an age where demigods battle in the galaxy's ashes, it is common mortals who hold the line. Today we pay homage to the forgotten heroes of the grimdark future, the backbone of the Imperial Armed Forces. This is the story of the Imperial Navy. And let's not forget about your story. The characters and adventures you wish you had but can't make fit with the rules of
Holy shit, I think I have those dice.
tabletop gaming systems. That's where Realm of Bassalin comes in, the sponsor for this video. This is a tabletop fantasy RPG with a focus on customization. The character you want to make, the adventures you want to have, the rules of this game are designed to support as many different ideas as possible, and then to get into the action as quickly as possible. That's done with modular skills and abilities that you could apply to any entity, and plenty of quick and easy configurations to fill out your world in the massive gamebook. It's got over 50 classes, 20 races, 200 spells, and 140 monsters, and of course you'll be adding more to that from your own imagination. To learn more, check out Realm of Bassalin with our link below.
I might have to check them out.
An empire is nothing without solid communications. This is doubly true for a galactic totalitarian state, with ambitions to rule one of the largest species in the Milky Way. In the 41st millennium, direct and instant communication across the stars is impossible. The astronomical distances, quite literally, see to that. As such, humanity has adapted. Most interplanetary communications are handled by astropathic choirs, with varying degrees of success. However, it is the countless ships of the Imperial fleet that comprise the physical link between mankind's worlds. Braving the horrors of the warp to reach distant stars, their sacrifice staves off the Imperium's encroaching collapse. Without them, hive worlds would starve, while other planets would secede or fall to invasion.
Yeah, that actually happens a lot in 40k. The exact borders of the Imperium are very nebulous because they're constantly losing contact and reestablishing contact with new worlds every decade. The purpose of a navy in most contexts is the projection of power. You want other powers to be able to see, we have a military, we are able to use it and get it where we need it to be. For something like the Imperium, that's very much a projection of power against their own people.
Part of the Adeptus Administratum, the most colossal bureaucratic institution in the galaxy, the Imperial fleet is composed of three distinct elements. The smallest, the civil fleet, comprises all privately owned spacefaring craft. Usually incapable of warp travel, these vessels play little to no part in the workings of the Imperium. The second is the merchant fleet. The oldest and largest of the three branches, they do make use of warp travel, though far less frequently than the Navy. Even so, the sheer distances involved mean it may take years or decades for a vessel to complete its route. In their hands rests the fate of entire sectors, who may wait years for their only link to the wider Imperium to arrive.
Yeah, the merchant fleet sounds very similar to the merchant marines in our world. The point of the merchant marines is they are a civilian force that is able to resupply the navy and military operations abroad. They're civilians, so they aren't part of the military, but they do work very closely with the military.
The third is the Navis Imperialis, or Imperial Navy. Composed of all space-worthy vessels of war, it is the military section of the fleet. Equipped with ancient, barely understood warp drives, the Navy braves the horrors of the Imperium to travel vast distances in moments. Only the Emperor, through the light of the Astronomicon and the daily sacrifice of 1,000 souls, guides them safely through their voyages. Plagued by the same
Only slightly less ethical than what Google Maps does.
institutionalized aversion to innovation as most other branches of the Imperium, the Navy has seen little significant change in the 10,000 years since its creation. After conquering Terra during the Unification Wars in the 30th millennium,
Yeah, navies in general tend to be very tradition oriented. They are usually somewhat averse to change, and that tends to be sailors in general. They are a very superstitious bunch. They have a lot of old traditions and customs that don't make sense to non-sailors, I guess you would call them. But they hold very near and dear to their hearts.
the Emperor looked to the stars. His Great Crusade needed ships, but war-torn Earth could barely build enough to explore the solar system. Only Mars and Saturn could create such grand fleets. Consequently, the fledgling Imperium adopted a much softer approach than usual towards them. Thankfully, both planets would enter the fold peacefully. Their facilities would build the first official war fleet of the Imperium of Man, the Imperialis Armada. It was on board these vessels that the Great Crusade would be propelled out of the solar system and into the unknown. A subsection of the Imperial Army, the Armada was fully equipped to operate in any military theater, including planetary invasions. The Armada was split into massive expeditionary fleets, the greatest of which were led by one of the Primarchs. The rest were under the leadership of Mortal or Astartes officers, usually.
Yeah, you need a navy to be able to get troops where they need to go. You can have the biggest army in this case, the galaxy, but if they aren't able to get from point A to point B, they're perfectly useless. That leads back into what I was saying about the projection of power. If you can't get troops and supplies where you need them, you've already lost the war.
A Lord Commander and a Master of the Fleet. The mortal crewed ships served as auxiliaries to the vessels of the Legiones Astartes. In some rare cases, expeditionary fleets could be entirely composed of unaugmented personnel. This was the case of the 670th Fleet under Lord Commander Namas Jira.
Yeah, even in the time of the legions, the Astartes made up a drastic minority of the imperial military. They were typically used as like the tip of the spear. They would go in, do the heaviest fighting in the most violent war zones, and then the imperial military would sweep in and finish up the job. They would usually stay behind to ensure that planets were compliant with the imperial truth.
While the Space Marines handled the hardest tasks, the Imperialis Armada tackled all other objectives. Their remit was large and encompassed everything from garrison duties, counterinsurgency operations, or assaulting softer targets. Whatever mission the Astartes could not or would not do fell to them. During the Post-Heresy, fully half the Imperial Army, and by extension the Armada, betrayed the Emperor.
Yeah, and like I said, this is what leads to the Imperial Army and Imperial Navy being completely separated. Horus didn't just use Space Marines to take down the Imperium. It was the millions of mortal soldiers that followed him into hell.
At the war's end, Primarch Guilliman enacted drastic reforms. He broke up the Legiones Astartes into small chapters, drastically limiting their power and potential threat. In the same spirit, the Imperial Army was replaced by two distinct branches, the Navis Imperialis, or Imperial Navy, and the Astra Militarum, or Imperial Guard. The newly founded navy could now operate in the void, but needed the independent guard to act as its ground forces. This severely limited its capabilities, but also protected the Imperium should navy elements turn traitor. Now operating mostly in a defensive capacity, the Navis was divided into 5 major fleets, each in charge of a segmentum majoris. These fleets were further divided into however many sectors and subsectors their segmentum contained. Segmentae, sectors, and subsectors varied in sizes, and were charted according to the effective patrol ranges of the fleet. The Imperium's borders.
Oh, so that's how they determine the size of segmentum. I never was able to figure out what exactly segmentum was, other than a division of the Imperium.
Were thus the direct result of its naval capabilities. Over the years, as knowledge accrued, ships became prized relics, sometimes millennia old. Mass production was all but impossible, and craft of the same class could sport many differences. Nevertheless, from the Great Crusade to M41, vessels were usually classified into 4 categories. These were, in ascending order, escorts, cruisers, grand cruisers, and battleships. Each category contained many variants and subsections of their own, but they reflected the general role they were expected to perform. Escorts were the smallest and most numerous war vessels of the Navis Imperialis. Further subdivided into smaller destroyers or larger frigates, they ranged between 1.5 to 2 kilometers, with crews of about 10 to 30,000. Their small size and weak armor prevented them from engaging other vessels.
Yeah, I like how in 40K, a crew of 30,000 is considered small. Like, we all know Warhammer is known for its overinflated numbers, but God, it just never ceases to amaze me how insane it is.
Vessels in slugging matches. Often commanded by young, hot-headed captains, they could perform many tasks, depending on their configuration. Usually they were assigned to support heavier vessels. They protected their blind spots and prevented them from being outflanked, like feeding tendrils guiding prey into a kraken's maw. Many escorts also carried out specialized missions, such as convoy protection, mine warfare, light scouting, skirmishing operations, or harrying a fleeing foe. Whilst individually weak, they were easy to produce and could overwhelm larger ships in great enough numbers.
Yeah, it's like Stalin once said, quantity has a quality all of its own. If you can overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers, that can sometimes beat a more technologically advanced foe. Or, in this case, just an equal foe.
Though they rarely took center stage in song or imperial propaganda, no sane admiral would set sail without a healthy number of escorts. Those who did quickly found their formidable flagships outmaneuvered and ignominiously destroyed. The venerable Sword-class frigate was arguably the most successful type of escort vessel. Sporting reliable weaponry and armor for its size, it acted as a jack of all trades. Its versatility, reliability, and easy production made it a favorite even beyond the ranks of the Navy. Serving from the Great Crusade to the 41st millennium, it was adopted by the Navis Imperialis, the Mechanicus, the Astartes, and many a rogue trader. It is a testament to the ship's design that so many branches of the Imperium saw fit to adopt it for their own purposes.
I wish they made models of these. I'd like to paint one.
The next category was the cruiser, further subdivided into light and standard cruisers. Ranging from 4.5 to 5 kilometers and carrying anywhere from 60 to 100,000 crewmen, these vessels dwarfed the escort class. Light cruisers were marvels of ancient technology. Only slightly slower than frigates, they were far more capable in prolonged engagements, balancing speed, maneuverability, defense, and firepower.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think after he returned, Gilliman kind of undid that restraint on research and development that the Mechanicus had. So they started developing slightly newer and slightly better ships, but they would still be the minority compared to these these old ass ships that could barely hold together with duct tape.
As such, they were true workhorses of any Imperial fleet. Their primary duty was to act as the eyes and ears of the Navy. Though escorts could outrun them, they could not outlast them. Unlike smaller vessels, a light cruiser's fuel reserves could last for years, making deep void scouting a natural role for them. This required experienced captains with patience to spare and an independent mindset. Light cruisers were often the largest vessels in anti-piratical or anti-escort operations, as a bigger ship would be wasted on such activities and could.
Yeah, another major role for most navies is anti-piracy operations, though in modern times that's somewhat taken over by the Coast Guard. Piracy has historically been a major effect on trade and foreign relations. So navies would be patrolling the coast looking for any pirates to take down. That was actually the cause of one of the U.S.'s first foreign wars, the Barbary Wars. Yeah.
Could fail to catch its prey. While it took the gravest and rarest of threats for a grand cruiser or a battleship to see action, light cruisers were constantly on patrol, guarding the innumerable Imperial shipping lanes from the Xenos, the Witch, and the Heretic. Larger ships had more storied pedigrees, but if the light cruisers failed in their duty, the Imperium would starve. The Dauntless-class light cruiser was one of the most popular designs in this category. Though lacking in prow armor, it made up for this shortcoming with blinding speed and ferocious firepower for its size. Besides its side batteries, the Dauntless sported several torpedo tubes and prow-facing lance batteries for quick in-and-out attack runs. Whilst a light cruiser could hold its own in combat, the first truly dedicated fighting vessel was the standard cruiser. In battle, after the escorts and light cruisers were done skirmishing, the cruiser was expected to form a line with its larger counterparts and slug it out with the foe. Heavily armed and armored, they sacrificed speed and maneuverability for firepower and armor. Usually between 4 and 6 kilometers in length and carrying crews of 80 to 100,000 men, they were.
Yeah, you kind of have when it comes to defense, you kind of have an option. Your ship can either be slow and cumbersome but have heavy armor, or it can be lightly armored but be quick and maneuverable. It's basically a choice between getting hit a lot but being able to take a lot versus not being able to take much but not taking much to begin with.
Were an essential bridge between the cruiser class and the grand cruisers. Though slow for their medium size, they were designed to operate in pairs and engage vessels equal or larger than them. They could also support the wider fleet, carry out reconnaissance in force, raid heavily defended targets, or establish orbital blockades. Owing to these facts, cruisers were the true fighting backbone of the Navy, filling the perfect niche in size, numbers, and guns.
I like that.
Among the countless variants of cruisers, the Lunar class was the.
I just really liked Gothic architecture in general. It's easily the best style of architecture ever, obviously. And seeing it applied to ships is really cool.
Most beloved. Dating back to the days of the Emperor, it was the only warship to be universally adopted throughout the Imperium. As such, even though other ships outclassed it, it was the face of the Imperial Navy. Excelling in medium to close-range engagements, its true strength lay in its uncomplicated production. Lunar classes could be constructed even on worlds unequipped for shipbuilding operations. It was a true blessing for the Imperium not to have to rely on a precious forge world to build one of these crafts.
Yeah, production is another important factor to take into account. You can have the best ship ever, but if you don't have the resources to produce it, it doesn't really matter. In the book, Constantine Valdor, they briefly discuss why they didn't just make an entire army out of the Custodes, and I forget who it was, but somebody mentioned that it would have taken the entire production capacity of Earth just to create an army of Custodes, much less maintain it. And so that's why they only had 10,000 Custodes, and augmented it with the with mortal soldiers and thunder warriors.
Next in line were the Grand Cruiser and Battle Cruiser classes. The older of the two, the Grand Cruiser, was ancient even by Imperial standards. Prioritizing robustness and blistering broadsides, it could deliver immense punishment at close range. Spanning around 7.5 kilometers, with crews well above 100,000 souls, they were awesome weapons of war. Only the gargantuan battleships outclassed them in size and
Yeah, and if you've played the game Rogue Trader, they briefly talk about how you have basically entire cultures that are born, live, and die on these ships. They may never step foot on an actual planet, and there's basically entire peoples native to these ships.
weaponry. Though popular during the Great Crusade, they were eventually replaced by battlecruisers. By the 41st millennium, their archaic technologies were poorly understood, leading to many disasters, especially in the warp.
Yeah,
Grand cruisers were also hard to refit, and often lacked elements appreciated in M41, such as the iconic armored prows of the Navy. Furthermore, most were designed for close quarters battle, rather than the longer ranges favored by the modern Imperium. As such, what few Grand Cruisers remained seldom saw action, due to their reputed unreliability. In their glory days, they were used for different roles. They mainly acted as line breakers, a tactic that largely fell out of favor through the years. Racing for the middle of the enemy formation, they sustained heavy damage before unleashing their broadsides at the opportune moment. Besides that, they could also carry out long-range patrol.
Oh, kind of like, I guess it's kind of like when you put a divot into a piece of wood or metal before you drive a nail through it. In this case, the Grand Cruiser is making that divot, and then once it creates the opening, the rest of the fleet will come in to exploit the opening.
And solo raiding missions. Some Grand Cruisers, like the Exorcist class, also functioned as fleet carriers, launching swarms of attack craft from their flight bays. This gave them flexibility against both larger and nimbler targets. The Avenger-class Grand Cruiser was considered the exemplar of its type. Sporting 2 decks of macro batteries on each side, several kilometers long, it was a quintessential linebreaker. If successful in its approach, it could confidently outgun most voidcraft in the galaxy. Few of these venerable vessels survived the centuries of punishment their roles subjected them to. Those who did bore the scars of thousands of battles across millennia of service. Battlecruisers, for their part, were specifically designed to replace their older counterparts.
It kind of looks like there's a city on top of it there. I wonder what that's about.
The Imperial Navy still needed a bridge between the larger battleship and the standard cruiser. The former was too rare and precious to risk, the latter too small to act as a flagship. As knowledge continues to decline, the Mechanicus scrambled to find a solution. This new type of warship needed to be simpler to operate and manufacture and more reliable than the Grand Cruiser. By M36, the Age of Apostasy saw another disastrous loss of knowledge in the Imperium. Unable to innovate, the priesthood of Mars instead merged the proven designs of standard cruisers with those of battleships. Though makeshift, this solution proved highly successful. The Navy could now field.
Isn't that kind of a form of innovation in and of itself? Sure, you're not technically making something new, but you're taking 2 different technologies and combining them into one. Maybe I'm playing semantics here.
The firepower of a battleship in the smaller hull of a cruiser at immense ranges. As such, battle cruisers were often used as flagships for entire sector fleets. Usually smaller and less armored than Grand Cruisers, they could reach some 5 to 6 kilometers in length with about 100,000 voidsmen. Meant almost entirely for ship combat, they could fill many roles. The Mars class, while difficult to produce, showcased all of these. Designed to meet every possible scenario, it sported formidable weapon batteries on its flanks, several launch bays for attack craft, as well as a mighty Nova cannon on its prow. The cannon allowed for single-shot kills at vast distances, while its bays and batteries deterred any enemy from coming too close. Though largely discontinued, it proved its worth in every theater of operation. Finally, we come to the pinnacle of human naval engineering and the pride of the Navis Imperialis, the mighty battleship.
Favorite.
These behemoths vessels were the Navy's equivalent of Emperor
Heh. I like how he has the symbol of Slanesh there.
class Titans, and were fully capable of annihilating fleets and worlds on their own. Created in the barely remembered years of the Emperor or the Dark Age of technology, their inner workings were arcane and misunderstood in the extreme. It was exceedingly rare for one of these Void Titans to be constructed, and their preservation was a military and religious priority. When called to war, they were treated as holy relics, and almost always acted as the flagships of their fleets. As such, they were equipped with powerful auger and sensor arrays to improve their command and control abilities. Their size varied greatly.
Yeah, a lot of naval vessels will focus on utility, being able to accomplish various missions. This could be resupply, communications, scouting, transport. But at the end of the day, they are military vessels, and so you need to have something dedicated to finding the enemy and making them not exist anymore. And we all know in 40K, they love doing that last part.
The average battleship, if such a term can even be used, ranged between 8 to 10 kilometers. Some, however, like the Gloriana class, far exceeded that number. The Invincible Reason, flagship of Primarch Lionel Johnson, measured more than 28 kilometers in length. As for their crew, they could vary anywhere between 25,000 to a staggering 3 million.
Oh wow,
They were, in all essence, flying cities, where generations of Voidsmen were born, lived, and died, sometimes without ever setting foot on a planet.
Yeah, like I said, you will have entire cultures develop and die in these ships as new ones take their place. Like these ships are in some ways less like our modern naval ships and closer to entire planets in and of themselves.
Sporting the heaviest armament of any other class, their sole role was to bring wrath and ruin to the Emperor's foes. Their painfully slow speed and sluggishness, however, made them unsuitable for any other role. Because of these drawbacks, they relied heavily on escorts and cruisers to keep them safe. Depending on their armaments, battleships could act as mighty fleet carriers, powerful long-range weapon platforms, or medium-range sluggers. Though by M41 the Emperor and Retribution classes were the most common battleships still in service, we will focus instead on the Oberon class for its immense versatility. Exceedingly rare and considered inferior to many other classes, the Oberon was constructed as a jack of all trades, and could in theory operate in most scenarios without escort and crew.
Having a jack of all trades ship is kind of a double-edged sword. Yes, it can perform any task you need it to do, but the success rate becomes questionable. Whereas if you have a dedicated role ship, it is guaranteed to, well, as close to guaranteed as you can get to succeeding at a mission, but it's less flexible and able to respond to the changing theaters of war.
Cruiser support. It achieved this feat by adopting most weaponry found in other battleship classes, with the exception of the mighty Nova Cannon. The drawback was that it lacked any true specialty, and was thus overall limited in its firepower. The Oberon sported 2 launch bays on its sides, each holding 2 squadrons of attack craft. It also held several decks of macro cannons and lance batteries, both on the port and starboard sides. Its arsenal was completed with forward-facing weapons batteries, as well as secondary dorsal armaments meant to deter fighters and boarders. And so, in the endless nightmare of the 41st millennium, the ships of the Imperial Navy continue their eternal vigil. Across the void, aboard vessels older than human memory, generations of Voidsmen toil, serve, and die unseen by the people they protect. Without them, the Imperium of man would fall to anarchy, madness, and chaos. Without them, the dreaded days of old night would return. In an age of gods and monsters, it is not only heroes who preserve mankind, but trillions of dutiful souls following their captains into the warp itself in the name of the Emperor. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no peace among the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods. We have many more videos on the Warhammer 40k universe on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing, it helps immensely.
Yeah, so after I forget who proposed this, but after World War II, they were actually talking about abolishing the U.S. Navy under the logic of navies are now obsolete because we have atomic bombs. Um, if we were to get into another war, we would just use our bombs, they would use their bombs. Navies would be wiped out in seconds. Well, obviously that didn't happen. Korea rolled around and the Navy played an important role. As long as war exists, you are going to need a navy of some kind, whether it's, the an actual maritime navy or in this case, a space navy. You need something to project power to get people and supplies to the different fronts, and you'll ultimately just need the heavy weaponry that those things can carry. You're not going to be able to have a massive 50-inch gun on an infantryman. No, you're going to need a vehicle for that. You're going to need a vessel, and so ultimately, as long as there is war, you are going to need a navy. But yeah, go ahead and give Wizards and Warriors a look if you find that this stuff interesting, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.